Trump has rarely been held accountable for his shady behavior, from stiffing contractors back in his real estate days, to his alleged sexual misconduct with nearly 30 women, to his 2 impeachments for trying to blackmail the Ukrainian president and for fomenting a coup. Instead, he has consistently been protected and rewarded, whether it was by his father or by his party. Those in the Republican Party who had objections just looked the other way. Others encouraged his behavior out of some misplaced desire for revenge against a changing America. And this man literally fueled a violent siege on our Capitol. And most of the Republican Party just shrugged it off or called it a regular tourist visit. And yet, what Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg is doing is not abnormal. It is not a political witch hunt. Even the original Teflon Don, John Gotti, had to pay for his crimes eventually. In healthy democratic societies, leaders are held accountable, and there are plenty of examples across the globe. Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy was found guilty of several crimes, including corruption, influence peddling, and illegal campaign financing. And guess what? They sentenced him to jail. In Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was indicted in 2019 for bribery, fraud, and breach of trust. And in true Trump style, he ran for his old office again anyway and won. He's now trying to rewrite the judiciary system so that he doesn't have to face accountability. In Italy, Silvio Berlusconi, the former prime minister and current member of the far-right coalition leading Italy, was acquitted of bribery over his infamous Bunga Bunga sex parties. In his entire political career, he has faced 35 criminal court cases. He was found guilty in only 1. Holding politicians accountable is not abnormal. What is abnormal is a former president who summons a mob to fight like hell after a majority of American voters held him accountable for the failures of his presidency by voting him out. Frankly, it is no surprise that Trump is returning to his usual playbook, posting erratic and unhinged calls for his supporters to protest his potential indictment. Nor is it a surprise that he is deploying the same anti-Semitic, race-baiting posts on his third-rate Twitter, something his congressional buddies and television allies are more than happy to mimic. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy told reporters that Trump does not literally want to have his supporters protest. But there has been a significant increase in online threats and violent rhetoric related to Trump's potential indictment. Almost all of New York's law enforcement entities are taking the threats of violence more seriously than McCarthy is. The New York Police Department, New York State court officers, the U.S. Secret Service, the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force, and the Manhattan District Attorney's Office are all said to be involved in security preparations. According to CBS, the NYPD will deploy river patrols, helicopter surveillance, SWAT teams, and armored vehicles to block access to certain streets. Additionally, NBC4 is reporting that all NYPD officers of every rank have been ordered to dress in full uniform and prepare for deployment starting today. Joining me now is Tracy Walder, former CIA officer and FBI special agent. David K. Johnston, founder of DCReport.org, who's reported on Trump for decades. And Tara Setmeyer, senior advisor to the Lincoln Project and former Republican communications director. I do want to start with you, Tracy Walder, because you know, it is not unusual. We tried to make that point. You know, Fujimori in Peru was indicted. You know, people have been indicted. Berlusconi's indicted. It happens all over the world. The South Korean former leader was indicted. It happens. But what's not normal is for a president to have already demonstrated that he's willing to foment violence on his own behalf. Talk about the security preparations, and do you think that it is appropriate that you're seeing this level of preparation for potential violence if Donald Trump is indicted?
Well, sure. Thank you so much for having me. I think this is absolutely appropriate. There's a few things that I'm concerned about. I know that the intelligence community's kind of been split on this. Some have reported that there is no directed threat, and there probably isn't. You know, we're not going to see someone get on social media saying, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, and this is when we're going to do it. That's not going to happen. However, we have to take any sense of chatter that we see seriously. And so what I'm concerned about is, even if some of these groups have waned, I am worried that Mar-a-Lago may have served as sort of an impetus for these organizations recruiting radicals into their ranks, because that event was sort of a catalyst, if you will, in terms of going after the president. And I'm worried about sort of the infrastructure surrounding New York City, their roadways, their tollways, their tunnels, their bridges. I think that's something that law enforcement is really going to look at protecting because of these caravans of protesters that could potentially descend on Manhattan. I think also they're doing a really good job, from what I can tell, of monitoring chatter on all those different platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Zello, which is way that truckers speak to each other. A lot of these groups use that. They're doing an excellent job of doing that. And another thing that I'm seeing that's really important is that intelligence is being passed between agencies. Secret Service is really going to have to work in conjunction with the FBI, with the Manhattan DA, with NYPD. And it looks like they are really making a coordinated effort to take these threats seriously. So that's what I'm most concerned about.
Right. And, Tara, there are the Ali Alexanders that seem to be saying, I'm going to sit this one out, dog. I don't think I'm getting involved this time because, it's been demonstrated that it's the people at the bottom that go to prison and Donald Trump isn't going to protect them. But at the same time, you do have Republican leadership across the board, from DeSantis to Kevin McCarthy, throwing in those little tropes. George Soros. They're all calling George Soros' name, which we know when they say that, it's that Jewish conspiracy, anti-Semitic dog whistle. They're talking about essentially Alvin Bragg is controlled by George Soros. It all is dog whistling. And so I wonder if, what is your sense of the Republican Party sort of repeating bad history and this time joining Trump in encouraging conspiratorial thinking around a simple potential prosecution?
Yeah, it's clear they've learned nothing, right? I mean, January 6th, the 4 years of Donald Trump, completely disregarding the Constitution. Trumpism is incongruent with the American constitutional system. And yet a major party that has been around since Lincoln has disgraced themselves to the point where they are now actually defending the criminality, obvious criminality, and multiple cases, not just this one. There's multiple, including fomenting an insurrection against this country, which has never happened before. They have made the decision. This is the side they're choosing. And it's unbelievable to me listening to this conversation. Let's listen to what we're talking about here. We're talking about preparing for potential violent threats to the Manhattan DA's office by the former president's cult extremist supporters. We're talking about this like it's normal. This is the stuff that we used to talk about, worrying about Al-Qaeda and threats to our country. We're talking about American citizens who have been indoctrinated and activated by Donald Trump and Kevin McCarthy and the leaders of the Republican Party, who seem to think that they can continue to manage MAGA, are continuing to give Donald Trump cover. So anyone who thinks that the party is somehow now on its way back to arguing over marginal tax rates, they are severely mistaken. Their little retreat down there in Orlando right now, which is supposed to be about, the budget and the debt ceiling, things that actually impact everyday Americans. No. That's not their agenda. They're too busy worrying about dropping to their knees in subservience to MAGA and making sure the king is pleased. It's outrageous where we are. Outrageous.
Yeah, it is unprecedented, and David, I think for Donald Trump, what's also unprecedented, there have been moments where there's been some accountability. I mean, you think back to the 1970s when he and his dad, were putting C for colored on applications for rent to rent in their homes. And they got, slapped down by the DOJ in the 1970s. They had to settle. You had, rent control tenants pushing back on them and attempting to throw them out. Fair Labor Standards Act has come after him. He settled some lawsuits, regarding his fake university. Some things. So there's a few of them that are up on screen right now. There was that $1.61 million fine for tax fraud, which is nothing really to him. But he's also gotten away with a lot, I mean, January 6th being the biggest one. But he's rarely paid taxes. He's cheated people, obstruction of justice. You just go on and on and on. Classified documents. But it strikes me that, it's interesting that you've reported over the years on the thing that's changed for him is his relationship with this office. I want to read something to you. This is about his relationship with a guy named Robert Morgenthau, which I'd love you to expound on. Morgenthau, they said, had a blind spot when it came to Trump, was one of his biggest donors, one he would recognize years later. In his final years, Mr. Morgenthau witnessed a new bloodlust, demonization of immigrants and people of color, the rise of white supremacy, and was taken aback. One morning in the spring before his death, I asked Mr. Morgenthau, the writer did, what his greatest fear was, and he did not hesitate to answer: Trump. He basically kind of felt like he could get away with anything, right, under Morgenthau. And then now he's got this black prosecutor who actually might hold him to account. That's got to be triggering for Donald.
Bob Morgenthau did many great things as the Manhattan DA, but Donald Trump was indeed a blind spot of his. And it's not like the authorities haven't known. When Donald had a casino license, he was up to his eyeballs doing favors for one of the biggest international cocaine traffickers in America, whose case somehow ended up in the courtroom of Judge Marianne Trump Barry. And the guy got served 18 months. His mules served 20 years. Wow. So there's a long history of Donald not being held accountable because he followed the counsel of the notorious Roy Cohn from the McCarthy era. And McCone said, if law enforcement comes after you, they're corrupt, they're dishonest. You attack, attack, attack. No matter what comes out, you never apologize, you never concede, you attack. And that's exactly what you're seeing here. And one more thing, Joy, let's be clear. Donald Trump goes around saying he loves America. Donald Trump doesn't love America. If he loved America, he would have peacefully walked away when the voters rejected him. He's trying to become our dictator, and we need to be clear about that. And all of the politicians who are trying to make sure they don't get primaried by speaking up on Donald's behalf right now, they are facilitating a man who wants to end our constitutional government because he believes, Donald believes, that no one but he is competent to be president of the United States, which is unbelievably laughable.